What's up, geniuses? Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Rob Markman. I can't believe it. It's been 5 years. 5 years ago, Beyonce dropped her critically acclaimed sixth studio album, Lemonade. And just like she did with her self-titled album back in 2013, Lemonade was a surprise release, complete with an hour-long film. We wanted to go back and revisit the groundbreaking work and discuss the undeniable impact of the release. And of course, I brought a great panel together to break it all down for you. First up, we have one of my favorites. I always love sitting with this woman, reading her on Twitter, learning, interacting, and just chopping it up. We have the editor-in-chief of Amaka Studios, which is an online platform dedicated to celebrating Pan-African womanhood. Evie Ani, welcome back to For the Record.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's always good to be back.
Always. I missed the Yankee bucket. Last time you had the Yankee bucket, I need that energy.
That's my signature.
I love it. Okay, next up we have, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I feel like her Avi on Twitter is right here on the For the Record set. That makes me so happy to see every time. She's a music journalist. She's a Texas native. And again, one of the most dopest people to read, to learn from, one of the illest in the game. Kiana Fitzgerald, welcome back to For the Record.
Thank you. So happy to be back.
We got to get you new pictures on the set.
For sure.
So you know what I'm saying? You have different options for the Avi, all right?
Yes.
And finally, again, no stranger to the show, Taryn Finley. She's the HuffPost Black Voices editor and senior culture reporter. Again, opinions, perspective that we all need, that we trust, that we respect, that add to the conversation in meaningful ways. Taryn, welcome back to For the Record.
Hey, I haven't been on set yet, but when all this is done, I'm going to be over there.
Absolutely. Yeah, the pandemic is messing us up, but I feel like we see the light at the end of the tunnel. So you have an open invitation as soon as we come back. And one person who is not on camera, but I want to acknowledge for the work that she put in, for the research that she did for this episode, for the way that she helped me prep for this, our super producer, Rahel. She is not here. Y'all won't see her on camera, but she is here in spirit. She put in all the work. So Rahel, you're on For the Record all the time, but welcome to For the Record. Yeah, give it up for, I'd be nothing without her. I'm going to be real. So I want to get right into it. This is about Beyonce. So, it's 5 years since Lemonade. So we just going to get into it. I think there's so much to unpack as fans, of Beyonce and fans of music, but also cultural significance of what this project meant. So I just want to get into all of it. First question, just a free-flowing question. The album arrived with no warning 5 years ago, and now what has become true Beyonce fashion. What did y'all think about the album when it first dropped? Like, what was the initial reaction? Taryn, I'll start with you.
I remember that was actually the weekend after Prince died. And I remember everyone said, oh, Beyonce has something coming on HBO. We don't know what it is, but tune in. I was at Coachella that weekend. So I'm like, there's no television near me. I'm at this festival. I couldn't even pay attention to, the acts that were on stage. Cause I'm like, Beyonce has this thing that we don't know what it is. I need to tune in. So literally, as soon as we got back to the Airbnb, when it had dropped, we watched because we just couldn't listen to it just straight. We had to watch the complete album, and I was so blown away. It was such. Of course, I think a lot of people thought it was a divorce album at first. And as it went on and as it, continued, I was just in such awe at the intent and at the artistry, and that it was specifically for Black women. Not to say that, Beyonce hasn't done that before, but this was just overtly for us. And it was just such a powerful moment.
You're right. Like the surface, it was so brilliant because obviously we had seen the issues play out between her and her husband, Jay-Z, in the headlines, in the gossip headlines, in the entertainment sites. So that was like a well-known thing. And on the surface, and I think many people expected it to be a divorce album or a breakup album or a relationship album. And I think that was the draw for the masses, right? But when you actually pull back the layers, you know what I'm saying? There was so much there. EVA, I'll go back to you. Like, what were your first initial reactions to Lemonade when it dropped?
I think that the scope of it was very apparent for me. I wasn't primarily looking at it as a sort of expose to Beyonce and Jay-Z's relationship, primarily because this is a visual album. So we could see exactly what she was trying to communicate as well as hearing that. And I think the visual album, the visual aspect of that album is what makes it what it is. Because sonically, I think it's a different experience. I think the scope of what she was trying to communicate is way more apparent in the film. And like it was very much so this sort of exploration of Black womanhood. And I think her relationship, her marriage was probably 30% of that project. If you look at the intensity of what she was trying to communicate. I mean, just from the cameos in there alone, Trayvon Martin's mother was in that film. Mike Brown's mother was in that film. There was so much that she was communicating. So I immediately sensed what it was, what she was trying to do. And obviously, just being a Beyonce fan, we know she speaks through image because she doesn't speak at all anymore. She doesn't do interviews. She only communicates through her music and through her visuals. So I knew that there was a lot more that she wanted to say. And like you said, the relationship and I guess the speculation and the drama and the reality and the truths and what have you was just one part of that story.
Yeah. Kiana, what was your just initial reactions? Like, what were you expecting versus maybe what was delivered?
Sure. So I had a very dramatic introduction to this album. I pretty much had to do a radio review for NPR for the album immediately after it dropped. So I had to digest it very, very quickly. I had to distill every element down that I thought was the most thought-provoking, the most compelling. It was just like a lot for a short period of time. So once I went back to it after the stress of having to do that review, I was like, okay, what do we have here? And what I saw was a very revelatory, very culture shifting, very monumental piece of work. And in my eyes, I thought that she was doing something extraordinary because, like the other panelists have said so far, we saw her place Black women front and center. And I felt like I had never been seen in that light by that status of a figure before. So for me, I was just like, whoa, I see myself. I see my mom. I see my aunties. I see my homegirls. Like, it was just like a very, very intentional and direct way of placing us in the front where we belong and where we hadn't been for so long.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you know, being a member of the media and having a job to do, right? And produce an album review or a written article or a podcast or some type of deep dive, because this is the business and part of the business is speed to market, right? And balancing that with like, how do you digest something that somebody potentially, you know, I'd imagine at the very least, Beyonce worked on this for 12 months, if not more. So, you know, there was so much thought and intention put into this, and then having to dissect it really quickly is a tough thing. But you always do a great job. Like, you know, I think you answer the call. Nah, for real.
Thank you.
No, you got it. Let's talk about the title, Lemonade, a little bit. You know, at the end of the song Freedom, we hear Jay-Z's grandmother, Hattie White, speaking about her 19th birthday party. And she says, I've had my ups and downs, but I always find the inner strength to pull myself up. I would serve lemons, but I made lemonade. In the film, Beyonce also references her grandmother's lemonade recipe and how she spun gold out of this hard life and how that recipe was handed down from generation to generation. In many ways, the title seems to reference how Beyonce deals and overcomes with hardship, right? And Black women, you know, as a collective in womanhood. What did you take the album title to mean, though? Like, and anybody can jump in, you know, just Lemonade as an album title. How did you receive it?
I think it's how you heal. You know, Kiana, I applaud you so much for, you know, just taking in all of that in such a short amount of time and doing a stellar job with your review. I really think that with this album title, Beyonce really wanted to show us, and with this visual album period, Beyonce wanted to show us what it looks like for Black women to heal? What lessons do we learn from our grandmothers, from our mothers? What lessons do they pass down generationally? What does that healing look like? That sweet healing, not just in, like EVA said, not just in, relationship to men or in romantic relationships, but in period, when you have given so much of yourself, like Black women do constantly, and you move with love, and that love isn't returned to you. You're pouring from an empty cup so many times as a Black woman, in America. And this title, Lemonade, shows, how do we pour into ourselves? How do we heal? How do we ensure that not only, our generation, but those who came before us, those who are coming after us, continue to know this recipe for how to make lemonade, how to heal?
EVA, with the title Lemonade, what did you receive from it? What did you take from it?
I mean, I think Taryn pretty much just hit it on the head. When I thought of Lemonade, when I still think of the title, I'm really just thinking about the root of that imagery. We all know that the fruit, the lemon, is a medicinal fruit. It has so many health benefits. And just taking that and turning it into something that can heal the body, the mind, I think it was such a strong title to call this album Lemonade. And honestly, I think it translates across cultures as well, but I think it primarily speaks to Black women of the South. And I think Beyonce is very deliberate about that. Obviously, she's a Black woman from the South. I'm assuming a lemonade has historical significance, cultural significance. Everybody's mother and grandmother and aunt probably knows how to make lemonade or has a different recipe in that same way. So I think it was an effort to provide something familiar to the audience in the demo she was speaking to, which was Black women, and just to sort of put that imagery into her own story and to sort of juxtapose it and superimpose it with these broader cultural stories that connect pretty much all Black women. And you can say all women, but it's very much so specifically for Black women.
Yeah, no, and I think it's very clear and apparent when you watch the film. There's no doubt about it, right? Like, there's the part where the break is in Don't Hurt Yourself, and we get that famous quote from Malcolm X where he says the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman, the most unprotected person in America is the Black woman, the most neglected person in America is the Black woman. And we see how, it showcased Black Serena Williams, Chloe and Halle, who are coming up into womanhood right before our eyes, and we're seeing them grow. Amanda Steinberg, Zendaya, through all the visuals. It's clearly a celebration of Black womanhood, and I think the triumphs, the highs and the lows of all it. I couldn't imagine, just how Black women were seen, right? Or right, that you felt seen in a way in pop culture. Like, I don't know if we have a pop star, and Beyonce is the, and not using the word pop to diminish, right? Because I think sometimes it could be watered down, it could be whatever. When you talk about popular, Beyonce is up there, and to really directly serve her message and her heart for Black women. And if men happen to enjoy it, great, because it's art and that's what it is. But it's very clear what this was for.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things too, like there's a range of emotion, right? Like, because I think so often, and there's the stereotype that Black women being pigeonholed as angry, or powerful, or always having to be strong, right? And Beyonce was all of those things on Lemonade, but there was also moments of vulnerability. There was moments of contemplativeness, her being soft. What do you think it means to also see so many facets of her womanhood?
Yeah. So one of my favorite songs on this album is Love Drought. And of course, it's beautifully produced. I believe Mike Dean produced this track, if I'm not mistaken. And there is a line in the song in which Beyonce says, "Them old bitches so whack, I'm so tough." And then she says, "What's up?" And it's like very, very cutesy and very like, I'm just like a home girl, like an around the way girl, like just speak to me like I want to be spoken to. And it's like, I don't know why that one line just sticks out to me, but every time I hear it, I'm like, Beyonce is just a girl. Like at the end of the day, like we're all just like, just trying to be loved and to be in situations in which we can love fully and hardly. So, yeah, I feel like she leaned into that vulnerability very strongly with that song. And she also, as you said, was very, she had her rough edges on Don't Hurt Yourself. Like she was talking that talk. She was not afraid to say like, this is what it is and you're going to get this message. So, yeah, she ran the gamut of emotions in that project. And I was obviously running it back before we did this. And I was just like getting chills, like just seeing how she vacillated from one place to the other place and just was not afraid to go there. And not only that, she wasn't afraid to go there across genres. Like she was very much picking up what she wanted, where she wanted it, and including people like a Jack White, like James Blake, people who are not necessarily in her lane, but making them in her lane.
Yeah, listen, man. I think everybody want to be in Beyonce lane. So it's like, what you gonna say, James Blake? Like the phone is ringing. Pick up.
Yeah.
And shout out to Ingrid also, who wrote on Love Drought. That's a very, very powerful song. And yeah, you mentioned Don't Hurt Yourself. Like it starts from the jump. Who the fuck you think I is? You ain't married to no average bitch, boy. Like, and that was the part when I was, again, as a guy, I was like, oh shit. Like just sit straight. Compose yourself, and you're just gonna have to sit here and take this beating.
That's my favorite song on the album.
That's your favorite?
Yeah, because I think people don't understand that it is okay for Black women to show rage. And I appreciated that from her. I appreciated the genre blending with Jack White. I appreciated the visual. I love the visual for Hold Up too, because it shows her being mad, being angry. She is a person before she is a pop star, So I do have a hard time reckoning with how vulnerable she's getting on a project that is probably very calculated, since it is a piece of art that she's aware that she's putting into the world and marketing and selling and showcasing. So I'm not too keen on relaying that this is something that, an artist is giving them 100% of, or an artist is giving us 100% of themselves. Do we ever get 100% of anyone? Especially a public figure who is at the level of Beyonce, no. But she's giving us as much as she wants to. And I think she's lifting the veil just a little bit. And I think that's enough for someone who has sort of been packaged as this perfect artist for her entire career. I think the amount of vulnerability she showcased throughout the album, I think it was just enough. And obviously it was, because that was a cultural shift. It changed the way we consume albums from a music business perspective. I think it changed the way people viewed Black women in the music industry. I think it changed the way Black women view themselves. So I think Beyonce did a lot by giving us probably a little bit.
Right. And it's interesting. And I think it's important to note, like, she has gotten the criticism, especially early on in her career, that maybe she didn't show as much emotion, or people felt like they weren't getting enough emotion, or everything seemed calculated. And then you juxtapose that with, though she is a public figure and she's a big star, how much of it is she entitled to keep for herself, and between her and her family and her loved ones. So it's an interesting argument, and it's definitely something that has followed her throughout her career. And this feeling like a moment where she broke through a lot of that, and gave us more than maybe she had given in the past. Taryn, what was your favorite song? Did you have a favorite song or a favorite moment or a favorite lyric? Or
I did, and I just want to piggyback off of the range of emotions, especially rage. I stand for angry Beyonce since Ring the Alarm. I think that she gets in her
Yes.
bag when she starts throwing shit, when she starts cussing. Like I love angry Beyonce. And I think Don't Hurt Yourself initially, when the album first came out, that was probably my favorite track. But now with kind of like just life experience and, going back and running Lemonade back at least, once or twice a year, the film, I believe that Sandcastles, I love Love Drought. That's also one, but Sandcastles is one where you just really feel, her emotion. There's this one line, she's like, bitch, I scratch out your name or your face. What is it about you? And you hear her voice crack and tremble. And, you all are right. We don't really see as much of, Beyonce's emotion or vulnerability because, she is very controlled and she has a reason to do that, especially being, one of the biggest, the biggest, Black women in pop. And I think that especially because of the criticism that, she's gotten, that her family's gotten, people have tried to talk about her daughter's hair, all of these things where she's just super protective of what she does show us. So, this little slice, I do think that this has been, to date, Lemonade has been the most vulnerable that we have seen Beyonce. I don't know if we'll get that again. We'll definitely, continue to get, whatever great works that, she gives us. Black is King was everything. But, as far as like that vulnerability and, those cracks in voices and things like that, I think that was a moment of time in time.
Yeah, those perfect imperfections and
Yeah.
and then having the courage to let that stand. To not go back in and say, you know what, let's do another take. My voice cracked. It's like, nah, like we're gonna keep that. That was the real deal. Formation was the first look that we got into this and the video and the Super Bowl performance. I was lucky to I just happened to be in the right place at the right time one night. In July. So if this is around February Super Bowl, in July I was in the studio with Mike Will. And he was just playing me records that he had. He was just like, check this out. So there were a bunch of records Mike Will was playing me. We were in Jungle City. And all of a sudden, I see a big bodyguard who I recognize like peek his head in to see if the coast was clear. And I'm like, yo, is that? And Beyonce walks in the studio. And we were like in the B room. We were in the small room. And she asked Mike to, she was like, hey, can you pull up that record that we were working on? And it was Formation. And, it was a version of Formation before it was done. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And luckily they didn't make me sign an NDA, which I would have signed. But she was like, yo, you're not going to tell nobody, right? But she was talking about the movie. She was talking about kind of her plans. And I was like, yo, I wouldn't dare. You deserve to roll this out the way that you envision, and any leak of information would ruin that. I wouldn't dare. And for whatever reason, they trusted me with that information. But it was so hard to hold in for so many months.
Ooh.
That is crazy.
I can't imagine.
That, highlight. And then Formation comes, and I'm going to be honest, what I heard in the studio was dope, and you knew it was dope when you heard it. But I think, like, paired with the visuals, seeing the Super Bowl performance, seeing the whole thing come together in that way was something that I could have never imagined. I think, look, people had reactions to it. Like, both great and positive, and people were taken aback, specifically white people. We just gonna be real about it. Like, they didn't know there was that SNL skit the day Beyonce turned Black, when white people was like, oh shit, like what? Like, she's Black. But Formation, talk about when Formation hit, and just the imagery and references to Hurricane Katrina, the issues with police brutality and how she really addressed that head on, the Panther imagery at the Super Bowl, which for whatever reason made America uncomfortable because America don't like to look at itself in the mirror. Let's talk about that moment a little bit, Kiana, if you want to jump in.
Yeah. So I remember as with everything Beyonce does, I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, what I was wearing. Like, I remember everything about what happened when this video dropped. And as soon as it opens, I believe it's a clip of her on the cop car submerged in water. And I was like, oh shit, like she's really about to do this. And as I watched the video and I saw the imagery and I saw that she was really speaking to these regions that are underrepresented, that are misrepresented in many ways, I was just like, yo, like Beyonce is not playing games. Like she's stepping fully into her Blackness. Like she's stepping fully into her role as someone who can bring about conversation when it comes to police brutality, when it comes to social inequality, all these issues. So yeah, when, she has like her fist up in the air when she's on top of the car, it's like a very quick scene, but I was like running it back like, yo, I didn't realize that she did that initially. So yeah, there are so many, just so many different breakdowns that you could take here. But overall, it was just a resonant moment, and it just sparked something in me that I knew was there in terms of like wanting to pursue more writing about these kinds of issues and wanting to pursue, listening to other artists who are also talking about these issues.
Yeah, that's right. Evie, do you remember where you were when Formation dropped?
I don't remember where I was, but I do remember that I had to cover Formation for an international magazine, an international print magazine in the UK, Grazia UK. And I remember having to translate what the visuals were saying from a cultural American standpoint to an international audience, which is something that I do a lot. But I don't think that it really hit for the rest of the world what these specific visuals meant. The communities and the images of the places and the people and what she was doing and what that meant for her to be on a cop car, submerged in water with her fist up, in a designer dress, like all these juxtaposed images and meanings. I had to translate that for this magazine. So I remember doing that. And I do remember at that time, I don't think people were as critical of Beyonce as they are now, because the efforts that she makes to sort of take her place within the quote unquote movement, if you want to say that she's a part of the movement, as a figure, public figure, a communicator, a celebrity, with as much cultural capital as probably anyone in the world, the most cultural capital. The position that she's placing is to sort of present these images and to speak without speaking. So I do think a lot of the criticism over Beyonce is warranted, whether it's Black is King or whether it's people looking back at the Super Bowl performance and how she's dressed as a Black Panther and sort of invoking this sort of revolutionary imagery, but presenting something different in other aspects of your life and your business. I think people just started reckoning with that. But I think when Formation came out, I think everyone appreciated it for what it was and what it was trying to do and what it did do. Because we'd be remiss to say that it didn't do anything. It's a piece of art. So it exists to be criticized and it exists to make some type of change. And I do think that it sort of changed the minds of a lot of people, whether it helped people figure out where Beyonce stands as far as her identity, even though I thought it was very clear to me that she's always been prominent about being a Black woman and, whether it's subtle or overt. But I do think that was a pivotal point where a lot of people were sort of, quote unquote, wakening up, or their politics were getting a little bit more radical. And I think they were still parsing through that imagery and having a re-reckoning with how they view the world and how they view themselves. So I think it goes both ways. I think it was beloved, and I do think that it's heavily criticized, this imagery for Formation.
Right. No, and you bring up an interesting point of that being a moment too. I think where people maybe where it was very apparent that Beyonce, who she presented herself to be as a Black woman, and never hit that, but maybe the first time that people had to reckon with that, or really, I think it's just when you deal with music in particular, but art and pop art, this willful ignorance sometimes that the audience has, where you could just listen to the music and don't have to contend with the problem. So it's like you could listen to Beyonce, but never have to think about what a Black woman goes through, what Black people go through, the pain, deal with Black pain, and you can consume this art. And it felt like that moment, at least to me, was like a line in the stand. It's like, yo, no longer can you just consume this art to make you feel good, or that you can be ignorant to Black pain. In case you're not getting the message, here it is front and center. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Taryn, anything you want to say about Formation? I feel like, just as that was like the set it off moment. Like that was, the opening bell to everything that we got. What was your kind of reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being at brunch, very drunk at brunch.
I was at brunch
when
too.
it came out. And I was like, hold on, Beyonce dropped out. Wait, what's going on? And so they played it at the brunch spot that I was at. But when I sat and watched it, it was like, whoa, like this isn't just, I heard the lyrics, especially like being, a child of the Great Migration. Like my people are from Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. So hearing the lyrics, at the brunch spot, I'm like, oh yeah, y'all hate us corner with, yeah. And like that felt like very, it didn't feel like something that I had to like think too much about, because like that felt like very much aligned with my DNA and in my roots. But in looking and seeing, these overt images and seeing, Plaster, stop killing us, and in these images that felt very, very much not only in protest, but also like for our empowerment. That was everything to me. I'm like, yes, like I love this, and I'm going to continue to, keep playing this back. Cause it's quite frankly a bop, but to see the response to it be so, I don't know why I was surprised, Lord, cause we live in America, but to see people, act as if her saying, these pro-Black things, saying, stop killing us, and pointing to these injustices that have, that have taken place and that oppress Black people, to see people try to argue against that was, I don't know why I was surprised. I kind of felt like shame on me for being surprised because of where we live, but I was more so frustrated that they didn't see the art and the message for what it was. And maybe that was me, trying to give more credit to people, especially like, hey, if this message is coming from Beyonce and, these images are overt, maybe like it'll resonate with more people. That was definitely a learning lesson for me. And, even just this week, we just saw, Dante Wright shot dead, and at the age of 20. That's a baby. Like that is like, I don't care, yeah, adult, like that's a child to me. So to see all of these things, still happen, continue to happen, after that last summer with, the global acknowledgement and rising of Black Lives Matter protests all around the world, you just see that there are some things that just don't change. And there are, these messages, or she laid this message for us to show us like, hey, this is going to continue to be an issue. And I'm going to step into, y'all thought that I wasn't Black. Y'all thought that I was whatever, but I'm going to put my foot down and show y'all like, I'm a Black woman. These are the issues that I care about. And if y'all are going to be my fans, I'm going to make sure that y'all know that these things are going on.
Yeah, that the world is going to have to contend with that. That is just not a celebration of this art, but it's a conversation and a protest and a resistance. And yeah, thinking of Dante, right, it's still hurtful, that this still is going on, but B, people will argue against it still, even today about, well, why did you run and why, like making these reasonings for these things to happen. Like there's no reason for it. So we do have so much work to do, and outside of Beyonce obviously releasing an album, that's a statement, right? That there are people who are on the front lines doing the work day in and day out, who are truly activists in every sense of the word, like active, 24/7, and making this their life work and their life's mission. And I think this gives us a soundtrack to it, but also to salute those who are doing the work day in and day out to get us justice. I mean, I guess that leads, and now that you think about it, it's like, damn, well, where are we now? But what do we think the overall impact of this album is going to be? We're talking about it 5 years later, right? We're talking about Lemonade 5 years later. It still resonates. It still touches. It still makes us feel, right? What about 10, 15, 20, 25 years? Like, is this one of those ones? What are we going to be saying about this album going forward in the future?
So I will say that this album landed so heavily and so forcefully when it first dropped because of the surprise element and because, we hadn't heard from her in a short amount of time, or actually quite a bit of time. So it was just like a moment in that era. And now we're looking at it 5 years later, and it feels still very impactful, but it has, for me, and I guess it's kind of like, it's a personal thing, but I've been in relationships since then. And before that album dropped, I had never been in a relationship. So I didn't understand the anger. I didn't understand the forgiveness and all these different elements. And now I look back at it after having been, in whatever I've been in, and I'm just like, wow, this song hits harder. This song hits harder. This song hits different. So for me, I think as I continue to learn and grow and develop as a person, I'll continue to revisit this album and see how does it reflect the changes in my life? How does it reflect the attitudes that I have about myself as a Black woman, as a lover, as a forgiver, as, all these different things that she laid out very, very eloquently in this piece. So yeah, I think in another 5 years, we'll gather again. Hopefully we'll all still be communicating. But yeah, I think that it's something that at the very least deserves to be revisited and deserves to be discussed in a meaningful way.
Yeah. No, 5 years we're going to be back. We're not going to be on Zoom. We're going to be in this studio, a bigger studio. We're going to get it popping. EVA, I promise you that's how it's going down.
I hope so.
I miss your energy. I'm going to be real with that. I miss your energy. I love talking to you. I love learning from you all. Because I'll sit here and just soak it all in and learn and grow from these conversations. What do you think, EVA, going into the future with this Lemonade album? Right behind me is in a different album, but Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life, which will just stand the test of time, right? Are we talking about one of those ones?
In real time, when Lemonade came out, I think there was uproar over the fact that it was snubbed at the Grammys for Best Album. Beyonce's always been snubbed at the Grammys for Best Album, which is a whole nother conversation in itself. But the cultural impact that it had in the moment, as we were dealing with heightened police brutality, as we were dealing with this sort of resurgence and repopularization of Black feminism, all the while, all these things are happening at once. It meant something then, and it still means something now, whether it's personal, whether it's political, whether it's cultural. I also think we'd be remiss to not say that Beyonce is a once-in-a-lifetime artist. There's not going to be another Beyonce. So we will continue to talk about her music, to talk about whatever it is she does beyond music. We will continue to talk about her life. And in 5 years, we'll still be talking about Lemonade. In 10 years, we'll still be talking about Lemonade. If it got snubbed at the Grammys, maybe it'll be recognized as one of the most impactful albums of all time. Maybe it'll end up on those lists years down the line. But we will still be talking about it.
And just for context, for the audience, she lost to Adele that year for Album of the Year at the Grammys. But it's always interesting. that's a whole nother topic and episodes. But how much is the Grammys really a barometer of and Adele is great at what she does too. But if we're talking about defining a year, a moment, it was clearly Beyonce. Even Adele said that themselves. But to hear Kiana say, "Nah, this album became more relevant to me in the last couple of years because of what I went through." To me, that's more than a Grammy. Like a Grammy can't do that. Like there's albums that come and go. So, I'd argue, how relevant is the Grammy? What type of barometer is it really anyway? Maybe, look at what The Weeknd went through and this year, and he claims that it was based off performance, and if he would have performed, like he didn't even get a nomination, and there's a business aspect to that.
It's an institution and it's a microcosm for society. So it has tangible and material effects on artists' lives and on the way that we document history. So, they matter in that way, but in the grand scheme of things, I think if you was there, you was there. So,
Yeah.
Listen, man, just another, Blue got her sippy cup. So, I think Sir got one now. Like, they just sippy cups in the Cardinals household. Taryn, what's your closing thoughts on kind of the longevity, the legacy that we think Lemonade will leave going forward?
So, and before I say this, I'm not comparing the two. But I do remember being a young girl and my mom would play out to the ground, especially in times where she was looking for and needed that healing. She would play The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And so I just always remember her turning to that album for relief, for healing, for, like to be seen in places where she didn't feel seen. And if I have a daughter, yeah. And if I have a daughter, I, just based on, my own experiences, the way that I have used Lemonade, especially in places of heartbreak, in places where I haven't felt seen, I'm pretty sure that my daughter is going to, hear me playing Lemonade and, or in watching the film. If I do have one. And I just think that this is an album that multiple generations, to come will appreciate and will be influenced by in a great way. Like everyone's already said, this album was a moment. But not only was it a moment, it is something that I believe will transcend generations and I truly do believe that the way that we've latched onto it as a culture, that is something that the way that we latched onto it, we haven't latched onto many projects in that way, if that makes sense. So I think that, this album will stand the test of time.
Yeah. And I think that was by design. That's a good point. I think the way the industry is moving with streaming and digital, like I don't think the music industry is fostering very many album artists. Like it's becoming more and more single driven every day. And we know Beyonce could hit us with hit singles. Like she's done that. And to create with the intention of like, this is a complete body of work that I want you to be able to mark the moment in time when I delivered it, that I want you to be able to digest it, as a full meal with this visual, with this intention, with this purpose, and then take what you need from it. It's special and it's necessary. And there's a lot of artists, especially today, that don't have that creative skill set. With me being nice about it.
That's a nice way to put it, right?
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I appreciate you all for coming, and sharing and enlightening. This is another one of those episodes where it's just more for me to sit back and listen and learn and kind of just give y'all the platform to really speak, because the work that y'all do is really amazing. And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate every time y'all come on the show. And, I know the audience appreciates it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Thank you.
And to the fans who watch us every single episode, you know I appreciate y'all too. I'm going to be in the comments. Let's talk about Lemonade. Let's talk about your favorite tracks, your favorite lyrics, the impact, the personal stories that it had on you. I'll be in the comments with y'all. Until the next For the Record, peace.